Yes, I was, as I'd heard that he was going to go a good bit higher than that, but it's a great result for the Phillies, too. I thought he was one of the best college position players in the draft. He's a plus-plus runner. He can play the heck out of second base. And I like the bat. There's probably not a ton of power. He's a little undersized, but he hits it about as hard as a 5'8" guy is going to hit it. And I think he's at least an everyday player at second. There might be a chance to get a little bit more.
Yeah, he was kind of surprised. He told us that he thought he would go in the mid-20s there. I think you had him ranked about 25th overall. So to get him at number 48 puts them in a good spot. What about the number 1 pick, Cornelius Randolph? They get him at number 10. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he was interesting because he's first of all, he's was expected to cost quite a bit of money. So I'm going to assume if they took him at 10, it means they already know they're going to sign him, and probably for slot. The Phillies are a team that does not like to go above slot. He's a bat. I know he's listed as a shortstop. He ain't a shortstop any more than I'm a big league pitcher, but he can hit. He can certainly hit better than I can. And that's what you're buying. He may end up in left field. I mean, I had one scout say to me, that's a guy you just put him in left field and hope it works out. But the idea is that he can hit. It's a good swing. It's a good approach. He looks like he's going to hit for some power. So it diverges a little bit from what the Phillies are typically known for, which is taking the high upside athletes. But this is better than taking a Larry Green, who was all power, no hit. This is a kid who can hit and has power, which to me is the much safer bet than the kid who maybe has otherworldly power, but can actually hit some.
Yeah, I was interested because when I saw shortstop, and obviously not knowing a whole heck of a lot about the kid, you're thinking, your best prospect's a 20-year-old shortstop. You have a third baseman who's 22 years old. Does this position make a lot of sense? But I guess if he projects to play left field, it makes a little bit more sense than if he played shortstop.
You run him out at third. That's probably what they'll do first and see how it looks. And if it's bad, and it might be bad, and that's really not the end of the world, then you move him to right field. And if right field doesn't work, you move him to left. As opposed to the kid, going back to Larry Green, I'm going to keep picking on Larry Green because it was kind of a bad pick, and obviously it hasn't worked out. That was a guy who was first base if you're lucky. And from first base in the National League, the only place you go is to waivers. So to take a guy who's at least played on the dirt in high school, and you're going to have to start moving him around, but you're not starting from zero. So it's fine. And if people are hearing this and saying, well, we have Michael Franco, and he's good, and he's in the big leagues at third base, this kid's 4 years away. You'll see where Franco is in 4 years and if Randolph is still even playing in the infield in 4 years. If there's enough talent, it'll work itself out. I tell people, don't worry about having two guys at the same position, especially if it's a position of value. You can always trade one of them, but it's very hard to trade for a shortstop if you have zero in your system.
Keith Law is with us. J.P. Crawford has been moved up to Double-A. And obviously, it raises some eyes here in Philly. You see the kid in Houston is up there at 20, and then why not our guy? How far off do you think Crawford is from being able to handle playing in the big leagues?
Realistically, I'd say a year off. They may rush him, and I worry that they may rush him because the kid's only played a little bit above he's barely gotten to Double-A at this point. So even if he stays there the rest of the season, that's not even a full season of games outside of A-ball. Ideally, he spends the rest of the summer in Double-A, maybe even pops up to Triple-A a little bit. They send him to the Arizona Fall League, which I think is a great experience for young hitters because you're facing a better overall basket of pitchers, especially a lot of velocity. Used to seeing Major League velocity, the Fall League is good for that. And then have him up at some point next year. My fear is that since the Major League club is bad, and you've got a GM who's, I think, pretty well known to be kind of on the hot seat, does he start rushing prospects up? Hey, look at what we've got. Look at all these prospects we have. Don't risk the kid's development just to show that you have this great prospect in your system. People who really know baseball and know the sport know how good J.P. Crawford is.
Well, he's pretty good, and people are excited because they're seeing Franco. I mean, is what we're seeing from Franco a surprise, or is this what fans can expect?
The only part that surprised me is he's looked better on defense than he ever did in the minors. Some of that can be better coaching. Some of that can actually just be a matter of a kid working harder, realizing that that's what he has to get better at to be better in the big leagues. What you're seeing from him at the plate is about in line with it. It's a lot of contact. It's very few walks. I think he's drawn 5 in 100 at-bats. I would have guessed he might have drawn 2 in his first 100 at-bats. So maybe he's even more patient than I thought. The contact he makes is hard, and he can get fooled on a pitch and still manage to do something with it because his hands and his wrists are so strong. I think he's a guy who settles in and hits with a high average but a relatively low on-base percentage and a fair amount of power, 20 to 25 home runs. With bad defense at third, that's not a great player. But with the defense he's played in 20-odd games so far, that's actually a pretty good regular.
Yeah, and Keith, obviously the other guy is Nola, and he's down at Double-A just dominating away. What's next for him? Is Triple-A something that he needs, or is that just a formality because of quote-unquote service time?
At this point, I think the service time considerations should be gone. There's no reason to hold a kid down. You've pushed off free agency by a year. The whole Super 2 concern is past us right now. So your concern instead is the fact that he's not missing bats. He's getting ground balls. He is not walking anybody, and those are pretty big parts of his game. But he should be missing a few more bats, and you just don't want to bring a kid up to the majors if you think he's going to struggle to miss bats to the point where he's going to struggle, period. If major league hitters are allowed to put that many balls in play over the course of a game, the guy's going to give up 10 hits every time out. I don't think Nola's really that kind of pitcher. I'm actually surprised he hasn't struck more guys out, and it does make me wonder, have they been telling him maybe, look, focus on quick outs, use your defense, let them put the ball in play, don't focus on the strikeout. At some point, there's going to have to be an adjustment, because I do think he's got some swing and miss pitches. There's no huge out pitch. It's not like there's some vicious slider in there, but he's got enough command and enough quality of stuff that he should be missing a few more bats than he has, and maybe that'll come.
Look at the Major League team real quick. Jonathan Papelbon's name is getting thrown around there a lot. I know you've been focusing a lot on the draft, but Papelbon has had a really good year. Does this mean that they might get more for him than maybe they anticipated entering the season?
I think that's fair, and I'm going to lean on what we've talked about. Jason Stark, you mentioned, and Buster Olney, and I have been on those Seamhead shows with Tim Kirkjian, and we've talked about exactly this. If the Phillies say, we'll eat a third of the money left for Papelbon, they could probably trade him and get a prospect back, because then his salary starts to look very much in line with what a quality closer gets. Not necessarily a top-of-the-line guy, not what Miller and Robertson got, but what a good closer would get in free agency or last year in arbitration. And that's going to make him a lot more appealing, because at the time he signed the contract, it looked like he was being paid to be an elite closer when he wasn't an elite closer and wasn't going to be an elite closer. But there's not that much money left on the deal. And if the Phillies will shave $2-3 million off the top, they can probably move him, get a prospect back in return. To me, for them to say we just want to move him, remove the contract, remove the player, is pointless. Get something in return. The system is still not strong enough that you can shed assets without getting prospects back.
It seems like, Keith, every time we have you, we talk Cole Hamels. Here we are, June 11th. He's still here.
Can we not talk once he's traded? Like, is this over? You going to break up with me?
Well, I mean, it seems like we keep asking how they're playing it. June 11th, he's still here.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think he's gone by the trade deadline. I hesitate because I don't know what ownership is telling Amaro, and you really never can predict what Amaro is saying. There was a story, I think Bob Dutton wrote today, about them being asked for Ben Revere in a trade from Seattle, and they asked for Taijuan Walker or James Paxton, who are two young 0 to 2 players of service in terms of years of service, young starting pitchers. You're not getting that back for Ben Revere. And so if Amaro is being unreasonable in his demands, then maybe they won't trade Hamels. But there's a lot of interest. I mean, now you're at a point, you're going to head into a trade deadline with a bunch of contenders or teams that want to be contenders that could absolutely use Cole Hamels. You would like to think that teams will up their offers enough, and hopefully Amaro will come down a little bit in his demands, that there's a trade to be made before the 31st.
All right, we'll keep our eye on that, obviously. And then the other guys would be, I guess, Aaron Harang. Is he the next most attractive piece they have?
Trade him now. That's
exactly.
the guy. Ruben should just be working. Every time that guy gives up a run, his value goes down. You've got to be aggressive with that one, because he's not an elite guy. This is not one you're the slow build where you're trying to push a little bit towards the deadline, get someone more desperate. There are teams right now that would give you a grade B prospect for an Aaron Harang because they just need innings. There are so many teams out there that are calling up, even the Astros, they're calling up Vince Velasquez. Do you think they really wanted Velasquez in the big leagues right now? No, but he was free. He's right there on hand. With teams doing that constantly, look at all the prospects or suspects getting called up to make big league starts for teams that think they're contenders. You couldn't call the Angels and get something for Aaron Harang, just a second-tier prospect. That's what Aaron Harang does for you. He made a bunch of starts. He soaked up some innings. Ship him out and get a young player in return. And that's the kind of trade that happens in June historically. Cole Hamels-sized trades historically don't happen until July.
Couldn't agree with you more. Was talking about that in the first hour. I think he's leaking oil. Get rid of him now. Go.
Yep.
Don't let him pitch again. Get him out of here before he starts to show. Last one for you, Keith. Obviously, we talk a lot about Amaro and the job he's done. I said if you took out his past, good or bad, and he was asked to take over this team from December on, has he done a good job from the end of last year to where they are now?
He's done a fair job, not a bad job, probably an average job compared to what I think other GMs would have done. He's moved a few pieces. He's made a couple of nice deals. I thought the Rollins trade looked good at the time, and it still looks good now. And I think that he could stand to be a little more aggressive. The Harang one's a perfect example. Better GMs make that trade now. Ruben, based on his history, does not. In fact, if anything, he tends to wait too long on some of these guys. So I think I would say so far he's done okay, but the real time to judge him, if you want to ignore everything before this season, is what he does between now and July 31st. Because when we talk again on August 1st or so, Hamels should be gone for something. Harang should be gone for something, and you'd like to think Papelbon will be gone for something in return, too.
All right, Keith Law, everybody, ESPN.com for more on the Major League Baseball draft, and obviously what's happening with the Phillies. We'll tap into Keith a little bit down the road. Thanks, pal.
My pleasure.